Here's our scene. I think it was really cool and I did it so fast. So the idea behind this is to understand the distance from the camera, the story that you're telling and the strategy, the best strategy for accomplish what you need to do in effects. And in this case, the boat is quite far and we don't need to have like a real flip simulation that would take a long time. You need to mess up with things. It always leads to more time, and in our case we just want to go for something to tell a story, and then we can dive in a different camera much closer. Then you understand what is the camera is going to cover, and then you do a flip simulation on that. But for a wide camera you need a long trail, so you need to simulate not only the boat area but a further area for the trail to keep evolving and dissipating during time. Let me walk through our scene and how I built that in Houdini very quickly, and you're going to see that it's very simple. So here's my scene, and the camera position for this shot was this very open shot, so there's no point of running a real simulation around this area if we can go along with another method that's much easier to iterate, easier to simulate, because we're going to just simulate some particles on top. And let's dive in. So we're just going to go through. So we have a grid. In this case it's 150 by 70. The boat is 20 meters. So imagine like simulating like for this long area, or just you need to follow along and then the trail would disappear very fast if you're just moving a particle simulation around this area. So it's much easier to run a longer area for this. I'm just subdividing because the division on the grid would reflect the amount of details of the wake. In this case, with the subdivisions on, I have 4 million points and polygons. So yeah, it's a lot of points, but totally manageable, and you can probably go with less than that and just smooth out. I'm adding the rest attribute, and here is the Kelvin wake deformer. So let me. So you see how cool is this, and it's have like actual moment, and it's just like distorting the grid like the ripple solver based on this geometry that is colliding with the grid and has the attribute velocity. So this is important. The thing is that my boat, I have computed velocity on it, so it does have v. I think I might need to unpack this. Yeah, you see I have velocity on the particles, but the Kelvin wakes deformer, it relies on the velocity, and sometimes the real velocity that your boat is moving, in this case the boat is moving like 5 knots, around 2.6 meters per second. It's kind of slow. It affects how this deformer is going to be distorting the grid. So I multiply my velocity by 2 in the z-axis. So if I have like just the regular v, if I just disable this, you would get something like this, and that's because the boat is going very slow and just have like this type of effect. That's not like, that's an artistic decision. I wanted to change that, and the way of doing that, you don't need to change the real speed of the boat. The boat's going to keep moving, but the attribute that's going to be absorbed by the Kelvin wakes is now I just multiply this by 2. And if you multiply this by a larger scale, what's going to happen is like you're going to start getting like these bigger chunks and less of the smaller wakes on the side, and the direction of the wakes start to become more closed, considering like the size of the boat, like it's going more towards the same axis of the V. If I exaggerate that like to 10, you see it's going to become like really strange. So you need to be very gentle with that, like we don't want to change too much. In my case, I like how doubling the velocity affected my weights, and I was happy with that. Then you have this, and this is ready to go with regarding the rendering. You can just render this out, looks great. But everything else from here is how to compute the white water for this. And there is a few steps. There is another thing here. Let me cover a little bit briefly what does it mean. Like, so gravity just affect, like a lower gravity is going to make it like distort more, higher gravity less. Then you have like this edge blend. There is this edge around what's not distorted and the distorted area, and this you can visualize that in the color. I added a color that really in the trail area that I output the deformation mask as trail area. And then we're going to use that later in the shading and some other things. But basically this is the area, and the blend mask edge, you see here, if I increase that to 1, it's going to blend a lot the edges, and 0 is going to give a really sharp edge. So the default 0.2 worked well for me. And then next we have the fall off range. That means like you see how big the distortion is here and how small, almost 0 in this area. So this is the range from the object towards the end of the deformation. So mine start like all the way to 10 meters away is the same, and then start to fade off up to 50 meters, and after 50 meters it's completely flat and is not being affected anymore. The magnitude multiplier is important. If I have like this to 1, I thought it was too weird with my settings, so 0.15 worked well in my case. Yeah, 0.15. Here you can just control a little bit of the ramp, how this is going to shape. This is the default and it worked well. So that's it for the grid. And then let's see how I computed the other areas. So the measured curvature is going to calculate both the convexity and the concavity of this. And we're looking for the convexity. So we have here convexity and concavity, and if we visualize, going to give like colors. The red is the one that I want. So I want this area to emit white water from these areas. Just deleting the concavity and just keeping the convexity. And then I'm using the attribute rename. I'm renaming the convexity to density, and I'll explain why in a moment. Here's the trail node, just to compute the velocity of these particles in the grid. And then I have like something, I unpack my boat and plugged it in a point VOP on the second input. I'm having the density coming from these areas. So if I visualize this in the color, we're going to see this. So it's just that attribute, the curvature, into the density attribute, and now into color. And then what I have here is the x, y, z distance from the boat, that is the second input, and I'm fit to range this from 2 meters all the way to 60, so all the way to around this area, and I'm putting that into a ramp that is controlled outside this node, and this is giving me this thing. So you see like this is the center of the boat, and then what I'm looking for, I don't matter this for me because we don't have emission in this area, but all this I want to have like more here and fading down into this area. And the result, I just multiply my density by this value, that is a black and white image, and then the result is this. We have like more here and less, gradually less and less there. Then I'm getting the V. In this case, what I'm bringing here is also I'm bringing the boat, and what I'm looking here is the normal. So each polygon of the boat has normals on it, pointing out from the boat. And I want this to influence my white water emission, because if you think about like the water hits here and it gets like pushed away from the boat, and it makes even more sense here in the front. We want the water to be pushed away from the boat. What happens is that the boat has this curvature in this area, and with the normal is pushing downwards. And I wanted to make sure that the normals in this area always point upward, because we want the water to emit a little bit to the top and never to the bottom. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm just getting the normals. I'm PC open and PC filter from the boat into the grid, and then I'm just taking the normals in both X and Z direction and keeping them the same. And I'm comparing here, if the normal from the Y-axis is less than 0, is pointing down, then I want to give it like this value, 0.3 up, and that makes sure that we have like this positive direction for the normal positive vector on the Y. And then this is also the same. I'm just computing the distance because I just wanted this to affect the grid just very close to the boat. So in this case it's 0.5, just in this area I wanted this to affect the boat. And then I'm multiplying them and then projecting them into velocity. So let me just delete the column. Delete. So now I have velocity on the points here, but I added this to have more because I thought it was too little. If we go here in the geometry spreadsheet, and it's coming from -3 to 3 or to 4 basically, and this is coming from this multiplication actually, because before was very tiny values that we're getting from the normal, because we have the normalized normals, and it was all the way to 1 basically. So yeah, and then go back here. Okay, yeah, we have normal on the velocity on the points, and then we scatter. And the cool thing with the scatter node is that you can say density attribute. So that's why we created this density. And if you look to our emission for emitting white water, you see that it's much denser around this area than it's in here. So the particles are going to born a lot more here than here. And you would say, okay, why a particle would born in this area? They just born from the interaction of the boat. But in reality is that the boat has a propeller under it, and also like the collision here make turbulence with the water that goes below, and sometimes they just boil up around like in the back. So there's always like some new white water particles being born in this area as well, but much less than here. Okay, then we need for a proper white water solver, you need like a few things. We need a surface field that is things that the flip simulation gives us. It gives a surface field and a velocity field. That means like the simulation has something under here. That is this. There is the meshing of the white water, the fluid surface normally, that would give us these attributes to us, but we don't have it now. And then we created. We just took these particles, set like a bound. The bound just gives the biggest area around these particles. I just increase it by 4, by 2 in different axes. So it give us this, and then we group based these points based on the bound. So we keep just that. We delete. We poly extrude, and then we don't even need to poly extrude those. Yeah, we need, because we're talking about the grid. Yeah, the bound doesn't have, but the grid has just like this thin layer. We need thickness to it. So yeah, we extrude, and then we do a VDB from polygon, and now we have this. And in here, the VDB probe from polygons, you can add this other attribute, the velocity, so I'm taking the v attribute from the point and creating a velocity field as a volume. And then we save our volumes, and here is our source. So we're just setting the p scale, and we just bring in the density fit range in a proper p scale range, and just exporting this to p scale. So what it means is that, like, because the density is coming from more to less, we're also going to have like bigger particles in this area and smaller in this area. And this is our source. Then the whitewater solver, the default thing is that you have like the vorticity and the acceleration and curvature, but it also has this other input here that is the extra source points. And I'm just adding those points into here, and the emission attribute is the density, because the output of this is a volume that's called emit. But in this case, it's just taking our density attribute that we have here. I could just set here, instead of setting the p scale, I could set like an emit attribute as well, but we already had density and it's enough for us. So I'm in the first input, I'm bringing the volumes into the first, and then in the second one we have this attribute. The p scale is important to have like the amount of white water emission. Let me go here and set to dark. And here you can see, if I play with the particle scale here, like for example 5, we would have like a more emission in here. My value was 2.55, and that correlation is in correlation with the p scale and also like the density attribute, but the p scale is also influence the amount of emission. What I have here, let me see, I have the normal one. I think I have just the boat in here. Yeah, we have just the boat. I'm creating this emit fog here, and I'm just using this in the volume VOP just to reduce the emission inside the boat. So that's basically it. And then we set the emitter. Then we run a simple white water solver. We don't need a lot of resolution. The distance is very far. The important thing here is to set, like, let me go inside here and show you. The one important thing that we have here is that into the forces, or no, the foam, in the repellents, I kind of use a strong strength, because this is something that from the distance you'd see these features of the shell pattern around the foam left over in the waves. So I just increased the strength range here a little bit, and everything else is basically the default. I didn't change much, just a little tweaks here and there, but because it runs kind of fast, it's not a lot. You can iterate and do different things based on your scene and things that work for you. And here we have our white water imported here. I think I have a different version that is in, yeah, this one. This one is the first version. Was too short in my taste, so I made it longer. And if we look from the camera, you see it looks enough details, and we have like all these patterns that like make it really cool. And if we don't have a lot of points, we have 2 million. That for white water is not much at all, and it ran pretty fast. I think the whole simulation took like maybe 30 minutes to run. Okay, so that's really good. What I'm having here, yeah, I'm just deleting the particles that were under the boat, and deleting those, and that's all. And in this side, I wanted, because this emission from the curvature, from the convexity of the ocean grid, it doesn't give us the interaction of the bow of the boat. So in this section, I created a little simulation for the bow, and it's pretty simple as well. So we have the boat. I just wanted more resolution on the boat, and we deleted the front. The way I delete this was just having the relative bounding box of these axes, so the size of the boat, just something. The normal I didn't use, but you could also use the normal. So basically everything that the normal is facing in the same direction of the velocity, you could just use that also to delete. But then I had like the back of the boat, there is some areas where the normal was facing the same direction, then I need to post cleanup. And in general, this is what I needed for that. So I deleted this part. Just clean. I remeshed this so I could have like a very uniform distribution of the points. Let me just this mesh. Recalculate the normals, and then let me see what I did here. Yeah, I did like I took the normal from the mesh, and then in the y-axis I added 1 to the normal in the y-axis, so it exporting the velocity. So you see I have everything the same, but if I just use the original one, the velocity here is going down, and I didn't want that. So yeah, everything is the same. I'm just adding velocity on the y-axis, so the particles would just go up and then fall. That's really good. Select the bow. Okay, what I'm doing here, let me see. Oh yeah, I'm just creating a density attribute again, based on a ramp. I just wanted things that are under the water. And here is a tricky part. It's not as tricky, but you need to remember that, like for example, let me just see the particles here, and let's visualize them as points and no velocity. Okay, so here is my area, right? And then we have like the surface field that we're going to use the same surface field here. Where is my surface field? Yeah, it's here. So I have this area, and some particles they are under the water, so they will never go up and jump, but I also need these particles to be born and to live in the water and go with the side of the boat naturally together with the environment, following everything along with the other particles, so it blends naturally. So we have two different things here. We have this one that is going to be born under the water. They will never fly very high. They are just going to born and to just emerge in the surface around the bow and just keep going with the other. And then we have this one that is above the water, because we don't want the surface to hold our white water. We need it to be above, so it's just born flying away from the boat. And then this is our emission, points to emit, and this is going to be again our source of white water, as we did in the previous one. But now we have like this area under the surface, almost like in the edge of the water. And again we just do a solve, the same thing as the previous one. The difference is that now we don't we have like this pop source. The pop source is just starting points from this. There are the points above. So we have all this emission coming from this, but also from these particles above the water. And then we run, and then the result is something like this. You see what I mean? These particles are going to blend perfectly with, they're going to blend nicely with our other simulation, but we also needed these particles to go above the water. And that's it. Basically I'm just doing a few things, replicating because I wanted a little bit more density, I could just rerun the simulation and add more points, but for the distance this works well. Manipulating the V, it was just doing post manipulation of the points. They were a bit too high in my taste in comparison to the bolt. Yeah, I didn't want, like, it was a calm motion. There was no point of the particles going that high. Yeah, and this one, setting density just for the render. And that's all. Thank you for this quick walkthrough. I think this is really key to understand, is that, like, how is your camera placed and how is your shot, and how the effect that you're creating is going to be part of this story that's being told through the image, and not just like I'm doing this effect and I'm going to just show this effect. It's also important to learn how to optimize your scene based on the distance of the camera and the storytelling and the environment and everything, and from each type of scenario you're going to design a different strategy. And in this case I wanted to show that, okay, yeah, from this distance we don't need to do a full flip simulation. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe. I will keep posting little tips and tricks like that, and hope to see you in the next one. Thank you.